Hi, I'm Ian Taylor. You're watching The Villa View. Up the Villa.
Hello and welcome back to The Villa View for another video. In today's video we're going to be looking at 4 things that went wrong at Villa Park this season. There'll be a video upcoming very soon as well where we looked at 4 things that went right. So Dan, 4 things that went wrong this season. Start us off.
Well, it seems weird that there's only 4, but I think we've picked out 4 things. Obviously we're going to touch on, well, we're going to do a whole video on what went right that Villa View subscribers will see in the future, but we want to start off with 4 key points where we thought Villa went wrong this season. So the first one I've got down is transfer business, which is a bit of a funny one because we've touched on transfer business in a good way in the next video, but there's also some bad points to our transfer business this season.
January perhaps too much too soon, and in the summer perhaps too much too soon in terms of incomings and outgoings. Notably, I'd say Rudy Gested's timing was poor for a lot of reasons. African Cup of Nations, Jonathan Kodjia going, we lost out, we're losing. Gested didn't sign a striker until deadline day in Scott Hogan, and then generally just some of the signings have been quite poor. Aaron Tishibola, example, Ross McCormack, Galini to an extent because of the fact he's out on loan.
Well, I think that was the worst. The worst thing is that we had just over £20 million worth of player that we signed in August 2016. By the end of January 2017, they were all off on loan elsewhere, and we're probably still paying a high proportion of their wages. So that's 3 signings that, I mean, everyone knows what I think of Galini, and McCormack and Tishibola have maybe got a chance to rectify it next season. But that's bad business. You can't dress it up any other way. That's a transfer failure because we spent over 20 million on people that for the second half of the season we couldn't use because we carted them off elsewhere. The stuff you say about Gested is true. I mean, I understand why we sold him, but the timing was absolutely terrible because we had no cover for Kodjia at the African Cup of Nations. Obviously, we let Ayew go as well, who was a forward player, so we suddenly found ourselves really light up front. As I say, we did a lot of good business, and that obviously we're going to touch on in future videos, but too much too soon is a funny one because I think in January I don't think we did it intentionally, but we almost sacrificed, writ off the 2016-17 season by bringing that amount of players in and having to throw them in straight away and knowing that they weren't going to bed it together from the off. I think we sacrificed a promotion push because at that point we were still in playoff contention.
Yeah, I'd say so. I reckon that if we looked at it on the basis, we wasn't that far off at that point, but losing Jonathan Kodjia was a massive blow, and then I think quickly realising that we were going to struggle to get a striker in quickly was going to be an issue as well. And then injury-wise, it wasn't great at the time either, from what I can remember.
No, I'd love to know genuinely, like the club must have known that was an awful lot of business to carry out in January. January is notoriously seen as a really bad time to do transfers, but it's come across like it was needs must for Villa. But we weren't actually in a bad position. I suppose it was fear that if we didn't move for people like Lansbury and Hourahan in January, then we wouldn't get that. We might end up losing them, not being able to get them in the summer. So I can see some of the merits in why we did it. But Hogan, for example, being brought in on the last day of January, we needed a striker in the first day of January, and it didn't come. It took us a long time to get forward in, and maybe Hogan wasn't first choice. Maybe there were other strikers we were trying to get in. I suppose it couldn't have been predicted how much McCormack was going to fall off the radar in January and have his issues that he had. So it's a difficult one, but some of the things you can't dress them up however hard you try.
Dan, the next one is goal scoring. Jonathan Kodjia with his 19 goals this season. Second top scorer was Jack Grealish, who really didn't play that many games this season. It says a lot for me that in the top 5 goal scorers, James Chester's one of them as well. Just simply the contribution from the rest of the side other than Jonathan Kodjia has been non-existent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure Gested's in the top 5 as well, and he was gone in January, as we've already said. If you're going to be successful, you have to share the goals around. Successful teams have a striker like Kodjia that gets somewhere near the 20 goal mark, and Kodjia probably would have gone on to beat the 20 goal mark had he not got injured and suspended towards the end of the season. But you've got to have people chipping in with goals. Chester and Grealish, as you say, they could probably argue that they did their bit, but goals from central midfield, I think we scored 1 all season from central midfield from Hourahan. Oh no, 2, sorry, Tishibola against, actually it's 3. We scored 3 goals from central midfield all season. Gardner, Tishibola and Hourahan, that's not good enough. you've got to have players chipping in all over the park. Even someone like Nathan Baker, the guy's 6'3", 6'4", is he? He should be getting more goals from set pieces. Jedinak from set pieces, you'd expect to be a threat. There simply isn't enough goals in that Aston Villa team, and I'm not convinced we'll do loads of business this summer, but the people that are already there, and I'm looking at the people like the Lansburys and the Horahans and the Adomas as well, they've got to start chipping in with goals next season, because Codgers doesn't look like he's going to be fit at the start of the season. You need goals from all areas, and we didn't have that.
Could you argue that it's the tactics we've been playing that's restricted these players from going on and scoring? The likes of Conor Horan, one of the best performing players in the league for goals from midfield this season until he rocks up at Villa Park.
Yeah, I think Horan and Lansbury have got a case to say that. Perhaps someone who was there in the first half of the season, Jordan Ayew, probably didn't score as many goals as you'd expect him to until the last few weeks of the season. Grealish was on three goals. He scored 2 towards the end, but as you say, he probably didn't start the amount of games that he either should have done or that he would have expected to. So 5 from him's a fair return, but I do think the tactics played a part, because the midfielders were barely getting past the halfway line, and the wingers at times were playing the second fullback. So at times Codger was isolated, so he did well, especially in the second half of the season, to actually get as many goals as he did, because we weren't playing attacking football and there wasn't a lot of support for Jonathan Codger.
Next thing that we feel has gone wrong this season, Dan, is the initial appointment of Roberto Di Matteo. Clearly didn't go well because he didn't last past the turn of the year. Yeah,
what was it, 11 games, 12 games Di Matteo was in charge. I don't think I was ever fully convinced by Di Matteo. I didn't think it was a terrible appointment by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think I was ever fully convinced. I think the thing that made me think it was a decent appointment was the fact that we had Steve Clarke in with him, who's a very well respected coach and has coached at some really good teams and has got did have a good reputation, but I didn't really ever hear anything from Di Matteo or Clarke while they were there. They both seemed out of the depth and lost, which is strange, especially as Clarke's manager at this level, and Di Matteo's got a team, albeit a long time ago, he got a team out of the Championship playing really good football and scoring a lot of goals. I think the fact that Aston Villa was broken going into the start of the season didn't really help. I do also think they did have a bit of bad luck, but while I'm saying it's bad luck, you could also argue that if you keep conceding goals late on in games and the patterns emerging, that's not bad luck, it's naive. I think there was a lot of murmurings about Di Matteo's coaching and that he was not at the training ground that much. Perhaps the fact that the players weren't knowing enough about the opposition, I think that was something that was levelled at Di Matteo, and I think he probably did let himself down a little bit, but that's something that we got wrong, because we all had high hopes going into the start of the season. That kind of got us off to a really, really bad start, and it set the tone, because we never really recovered from that. We were always chasing, and we never made up any ground.
I remember at the start of the season we were dominating teams, and I remember saying to you, I think, that one day we're going to turn around and absolutely hit somebody for 6, and that never happened. And as soon as we realised that was never going to happen, it was sort of a downward spiral from there onwards. I think Huddersfield Town was quite early on in the season when Heffler scored the late goal for them, was a clear example of this. Few other games as well where we were just so off the pace and off the ball when it came to the last 10 minutes. I don't even know, considering we'd dominate these teams beforehand as well.
Yeah, well, that's one thing Bruce sorted out. He obviously sorted out the defence, because we didn't concede too many late goals under him. I think the straw that broke the camel's back with Di Matteo actually came really, really early on, because we played Forest at home, went 1-0 down, and then got ourselves 2-1 up. Really good atmosphere at Villa Park. The game's on telly. The fans are thriving, and we did absolutely batter them. That day we should have scored a lot more than we did, but then it was that same old story, and it was obviously Henry Lansbury who popped up, and I feel that just the confidence just drained from us at that point, and I don't think we ever really recovered from that game, and I do think it was an uphill task for Di Matteo from then, because there was murmurings from the fans that this wasn't going to work out, and obviously they were proved right. I do think he was unfortunate in some ways, Di Matteo, but you kind of feel like we appointed him as more of a marketing thing than actually on his football nous.
Potentially, yeah, and then Steve Clarke wise as well, I don't get why it didn't work.
Steve Clarke's gone nowhere since, has he? So Aston Villa's obviously damaged another coach/manager's career, because I don't think we've seen Steve Clarke rock up anywhere since. It looks a good managerial team, those two. Because of Clarke for me. He was the one I was more excited about, but it didn't work, and that's got to be one of the main reasons why we haven't got anywhere near the heights we were expecting this season.
Perhaps looking back as far as pre-season, fitness and that element of the game possibly wasn't there either with the coaching staff as well. So multiple reasons that management, we feel, didn't go too well in terms of appointments at the start of the season. Dan, the final point we decided on as being an issue this season is...
Away form, not good, again. For as many seasons as I can remember now, away form's been a problem, and I thought being in the Championship it might be a chance to rectify it. Away support was sublime. The fans that travelled the length of the country did not get rewarded for their loyalty and their support, because we just can't seem to catch a break. Away from home, we just never win a substantial amount of games, and if you're going to challenge at the top end of the Championship, you obviously have to win some away games, and we didn't win enough.
It was a monkey on our backs, wasn't it, for that whole period up to when we beat Reading away from home, and then obviously winning on Sky against QPR. Those 2 points, monkeys off our backs, but we didn't follow it up that well.
Did we only win 4? We beat Rotherham and Wigan, didn't we? Was it only 4 games we won away all season? That's no good. 4 out of 23. That's pathetic. And that's again something that it has to change, because if it doesn't change, we will again say we'll be in the same position in 12 months' time. Trouble is, if you're not doing well away, you're putting an awful lot of pressure on yourselves at home, and to an extent we delivered at home, but you pretty much will need to win 90% of your home games if you're not picking up any points away. And I don't really know what it is. I mean, some of the performances away from home, I remember the Norwich game just before Christmas, unbelievably bad display. Like, Norwich were on a terrible run of form at that point as well. It seems like away from home, if a team's on a bad run and Villa rock up, then that bad run's put to an end immediately. That was what happened with Norwich. I think Alex Neil was on his way out at that point, but they beat us and he gave him a bit more time. We just never seem to do anything away from home. I don't even think it's particularly tactical, because you can understand being a bit more defensive away from home. A lot of teams go away and do that. We definitely didn't score. I mean, we didn't score enough goals all season, as we've touched on, but we definitely didn't score enough away from home, for sure.
That is it for what we feel has gone wrong this season at Villa Park. We did a video actually at Villa Park on what we felt went right this season. That's coming out very soon, so make sure you go and check that out as well. Give us your thoughts below in the comments section, and if you have enjoyed this video, then please do drop us that like and subscribe to The Villa View if you are new to the channel. If you enjoyed that video, why not watch another one? Click the video choices on screen now to go and watch them in full. And don't forget to subscribe. Click on our logo there on the left and press subscribe. Easy.